Hey everybody, welcome back. So today I'm doing part one of my Q&A from the questions that you guys sent me. So in order to keep these kind of at a shorter length, I decided to kind of divide up the questions and sort of put them in a little bit of an order so there was a little bit more of a fluidity to the types of questions, and also combined a couple if I felt that the answer would be similar to another question. And I am absolutely amazed by how many questions I got and how amazing the questions are. Like, I wasn't even sure anyone would even ask anything. So the fact that you guys actually did ask as many as you did is really, really exciting. So without further ado, let's jump right into the questions. So first up, I have a couple questions from Dylan Prell. Do you think there will be another release of the Friday the 13th films, including the New Line films? So yes, I do think so. In fact, there's a lot of rumors going around that some of the actors from some of the films have recorded new commentary tracks for some of the films. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to what this means because, as some of you know, like, the lawsuit, I think it was settled. I don't know if it's 100% complete, but settled enough. And that helped loosen up a lot of the rights issues that had gotten tied up because of the lawsuit. And obviously the big rumor is the fact that it is going to be a Scream Factory box set, because they do have relationships with both Paramount and Warner Brothers, who owns New Line Cinema. I mean, I'm obviously keeping an eye out on any news on this. Next question from Dylan. What's your thoughts on the changing mask of Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees? Do you have favoring opinions? I think some of that actually just came down to, like, with the Friday the 13th films, I think they were trying to be consistent, at least for a little while, for the most part. You know, just change it up, you know, hopefully to kind of just make it stand out, so that the image of Jason, for example, in the Friday the 13th films, his own unique look for that film. And indeed, for those of us who are fans, I mean, you know, I can definitely tell which film a specific Jason is for just from, you know, a quick image, or even just by the hockey mask, actually. And as far as Michael Myers went, I think a lot of that actually had to do with licensing issues, I believe, with Don Post. I think that's why in some of the later sequels, it doesn't quite match exactly, because I think they didn't really want it to match the original Don Post mask, and also too much like William Shatner. I think they were just fearing a lawsuit. So they try to just, you know, have it be close enough, but change it up a little bit. And if I did have a favorite for each one, probably the final chapter mask for me, for Jason. As far as Michael Myers goes, I mean, honestly, the original, that first film mask. So the next question, I'm actually going to combine two of them. Dylan asked one and Andrew Bellina asked something semi-similar, so I'm actually going to combine the two. So Dylan asked, what films do you think still need a Blu-ray release? And Andrew Bellina asked, if you could have a Blu-ray release of any horror movie that isn't already on Blu-ray, what would it be? So these are films that, to my knowledge, have not gotten Blu-ray releases, kind of thing, or at least Region A Blu-ray releases. So I'm going to go with Alone in the Dark, Alligator, Mario Bava's Shock, aka Beyond the Door 2, which some of you had mentioned during my Beyond the Door review, and I agree, that needs a Blu-ray release. Blood Beach, which I want to say, I thought somebody announced that they might be releasing that, but I can't remember for sure. The Borrower, Bruiser, George Romero's The Bruiser. Even if I'm the only fan of that film, I want a Blu-ray release. Deadly Friend, Deep Star 6, Fade to Black, Fright Night Part 2, Martin, Return to Horror High, Revolver, even though I did get that German release, The Sword and the Sorcerer, and They Call Her One Eye, aka Thriller. Those are some. I'm sure I could list a lot more. And I also tried to think of ones that, again, hadn't, you know, because there are a lot of films that got early releases and, like, on Blu-ray and stuff that weren't really well done and really need to be re-released. I tried to avoid those, except for one, which actually goes back to a previous question that I do hope fixes this, and that is for Friday the 13th Part 3, I want it in actual 3D. And I'm hoping, if this new box set is actually happening, that please do that. I really hope that happens. And the last question from Dylan, do you collect films in other formats aside from Blu-ray and 4K? I've been collecting the crap out of Laserdisc as of lately. I actually do have a pretty large collection of Laserdiscs, decent sized VHS collection. Now, I'm not actively collecting for them on a whole. However, if I see a specific title that I may want to get for more of a just collector kind of like display piece, piece, I would definitely, especially for VHS, like a first release VHS of some films. Not many. There's a couple I would love to get. That's really how I'm kind of looking at anything. Next question is from CMB76, and I thought that was actually kind of a cool question. I'd like to really know what you guys have an answer for this one. Do you have any films in your collection that you might put away if people are coming over? Kind of like guilty pleasures that you might not want anyone to know about? Or are you the type who likes something and doesn't care what anyone else thinks about it? I'm a little bit in the middle. Depending on who was coming over, I might be a little cautious about anything that is overtly displayed. And that doesn't just go for movies. I mean, that literally goes for anything. But I'd say I'm pretty careful about what is actually seen. I mean, for example, for the most of my movies, which you guys will see soon, very few are front-facing. Most of them are, you just see the spine. Because there's so many in this room specifically, I think unless someone literally went up and just started reading kind of one by one, it's, your mind just interprets as just sort of a wash of, movies sitting on a shelf. Because I do have some extreme movies, but even then, I don't even think, unless you actually knew what it was, like the covers aren't really that graphic or anything. I mean, I do have a couple releases, but again, they're all sitting sideways on the shelf. I do have some of the Vinegar Syndrome adult releases that they've released of, some of the older adult films. But again, I mean, you'd have to pull them out and kind of really look at it. And some of the very few front-facing ones, I mean, they're kind of benign, like Jaws, Fright Night. But yeah, I can't think of actually anything I would like actively put. I'm like, I don't even know who would come over that I would be really worried about. Who didn't already know, on some level, my bizarre tastes in in movies. Next up is from Simmons N, I think I'm pronouncing that right, who I met at Flashback last year. And he asked favorite 80s soundtrack songs. So I have a million of them. Because I love 80s music in general. But instead of picking out a couple songs, what I actually did was pick out a couple of 80s soundtrack song albums. Ones that have more than like one or two songs. Like pretty much like for me, like almost the entire album I can just put on and listen to. I would say for sure the main one is Return of the Living Dead. I think that soundtrack is absolutely amazing. I listen to it literally all the time. But I also have Fright Night, which I'm sure surprises none of you. And The Lost Boys. And for sort of non-horror stuff like Back to the Future, love that one. Summer School. I love the soundtrack to Summer School. That's another one. Oh man, all the songs of Summer School I just love. Next up, he has favorite flashback weekend memories. Now, I have a lot of personal ones, just good times with friends and things like that. But I will pick out two that I think have been really special because they keep coming back, either in conversations with people that I'll have, or people will see them and they're like, wow, kind of they'll react to them. One is the Halloween 3 reunion that they did 4 years ago, maybe. Somewhere around there. So I have a photo op that has, pretty much like the entire main cast, plus, Tommy Lee Wallace was there. That's one I've gotten so many comments on over the years and everything. It is one of my favorite photo ops. And the other one would be from the last time I saw George Romero. And that was special for a couple of reasons. One, because unfortunately, it was the last time I got to see George. He and I got to talk for a little bit. I'd already met him several times before that, but that was kind of like a really special one. And they were also doing a Dawn of the Dead reunion, so they also had Ken Foray, Scott Reiniger, Galen Ross, David Emge. They were all there. And of course I had a photo op with the four of them and George. You can see how tall some of them are compared to me. And then finally he asked, are you a fan of The Simpsons? If so, any favorite episodes? I am a fan of The Simpsons, especially the first, 13, 14 seasons. So many great episodes. And I think most of the ones I love, are the ones mostly everyone else loves as well. One of the ones that I think sometimes people don't mention too much, which is one I absolutely love, and it is A Tale of Two Springfields, where they need to add an area code, so they sort of divide up Springfield into two parts by the area code. It becomes this big thing because one area code is sort of like the rich side of town, and then the other area code is sort of like the poor side of town. And I just think the episode's really funny. And there's one moment specifically, Bart and Homer are watching the news, and Ken Brockman, who's on the rich side of town, he was doing the news, and he's sort of putting down the people in the other side. And Ken Brockman is like, well, we speak in a well-educated manner, while they use phrases like, oh yeah, and come here a minute. And then Homer's like, oh yeah, they think they're better than us, huh? Bart, come here a minute. Bart's like, you come here a minute. Homer's like, oh yeah, shaking his fist. The first time I saw that, I literally could not stop laughing. I mean, like to the point where like it hurt. I was laughing so much, so hard. I don't know why, but that, like, for some reason, that little moment just killed me. Next up is a question for Madman, and that is, what is your favorite book that inspired a film? I would probably say The Exorcist and The Shining. Each one had a very interesting impact on me when I read the books. I remember reading The Exorcist was probably the one book I literally read in a very short time period. And The Shining was one which I remember there were a couple times while I was reading the book, I got so invested in what was happening while I was reading it that it sounds weird, but I almost literally kind of forgot where I was. Not in a weird way, but it's the kind of thing where, you sort of stop reading and it's like, oh man, I was like really into that. Another one from Madman is, what is your favorite documentary of a film? I would say, Heart of Darkness, maybe, I think is probably my favorite. Which is the making of Apocalypse Now. And another one is American Movie. I've mentioned that one before. That's a great one. And one of my favorite sort of making ofs that is out there that I really, really enjoy is actually the making of Psycho. I think it's one that's been on pretty much like every release because it's an older one. I think I made it like 20 years ago or something like that. But it's really, really good, really in depth, and really has a lot of stories and stuff. And then finally, Madman asks, what is your favorite genre other than horror? And that is action. I really love action films. I kind of feel like if someone can do action even moderately well, I really admire that. I mean, I love movies of all kinds, but definitely horror and action are definitely sort of my two favorite ones. Bird in a Sweater asks, that's a great name, what's your favorite horror trope? Like, if this thing is in a movie, this particular setting, or a particular bad guy, or monster, or theme, or whatever, you're going to put it on or keep watching it. I think two things that'll definitely make me check out a movie no matter what is, if it's a werewolf movie, I think I will definitely watch it. I have this fascination with werewolves. Again, I'm sure it goes back to when I saw American Werewolf in London, way too young. I'm sure it traumatized me in ways I'm not even aware of. But yeah, even a bad werewolf movie, like, I will watch and probably enjoy it. Another one is haunted house movies. As long as they're, semi-competent, they will probably creep me out. And also if somebody tells me if a movie is like too extreme or something, or should not, like, no one should watch this movie. It's too violent, it's too gory, whatever. That'll make me want to watch that film about 10 times more. So I've seen some pretty messed up films just because everyone else said, like, you should watch it. It's like, well, okay. So I'm going to. And then finally, Cat Lover asks, I know you have a film school background and would like to know more about that and what inspired you to study film formally. All of us who are film fanatics seem to acquire our passion early on in life. What kind of environment did you grow up with that ignited that flame? And Tim Hayes had also asked, what do you think you're more of, a film fan or a filmmaker? So I wanted to kind of just combine those in my answer. So I often say that I saw Star Wars when I was really, really young, and it basically changed my life. Now, I'm sure there were probably about 10 things that sort of happened around the same time, but for me, for some reason, Star Wars just kind of sticks out, because I think it makes for a pretty good story. But around that time that I did see Star Wars for the first time, it did make me become fascinated with movies, with telling stories visually, visual storytelling and all that. And I started watching movies differently. I started watching TV differently. I was playing with my toys differently. All of a sudden, it was like if I had action figures, my eye would become the camera, and so I'd have like a wide shot and maybe medium shot, a little close up. Like I would kind of move my head to mimic the camera, even though I didn't quite fully understand the technicalities of it at the time. I realized that was sort of becoming ingrained in me. And of course, my love of film and my love of filmmaking, they flourished, alongside each other. Because for me, I do think they do go hand in hand. You kind of need to be a film fanatic in order to want to be a filmmaker. You're a filmmaker because you are a film fanatic. But once I really found out what a filmmaker was, like I kind of knew like that's what I wanted to be. Originally I wanted to be an actor because I think when you're a kid growing up and you're watching, a bunch of movies and stuff, you see the actors. And plus I do love acting, but I really wanted to make movies. And once I really found out what a director actually was, all of a sudden it was like, oh, can I do both? Man, when it came to film school, I mean, when it came time for me to choose a college, my parents were like, "Well, where do you want to start looking?" And I said, I want to go to a film school, and I'm either going to a film school or I'm not going to any school." And so they thought about it, and they were like, "Okay, well, we're gonna go along with this." I don't know. I think they were okay with it, but still. And I went to film school just as things were starting to go the digital route. But my initial education in film school was still based in the quote unquote old way. You worked with film, you shot on film, you edited on film, you recorded sound with a Nagra, all that stuff. So that's all I worked with. And then the digital stuff kind of, was creeping in more towards the end. But even then, by that point, I'd already taken all my main classes. So actually, after I graduated, I had to teach myself all the digital things, how to use digital cameras, digital editing on computer, and all that stuff. I think the nice thing about though being taught in the older way, I hate using that term, but I mean in essence the older way, because you were shooting on film and because you were editing on film, your resources were very specific. You only had so much film to shoot on, and once you edit, once you cut that film, like you've cut that film. So it really created a discipline that you had to know what you wanted. You had to know what you were shooting. You had to know how you were going to edit it all together. So that discipline, I think, is very beneficial and something I definitely brought with me no matter what it is I do. I think that's why I can pre-visualize anything, and very quickly too. And I think that just goes back to that discipline. Like, I have to know what I want. That doesn't mean I can't like waver on it, or change my mind or something. You always have to be semi-flexible, but going into it, you still need to have a clear vision. And I think that's what that gave me. So that's it for part one. I'm breaking these up so they're not too long. I think it's probably already long enough. So there are other questions that I'm going to get to in the next one. And if anyone has a question, because I'm not recording these all at the same time, feel free to ask me a question in the comments and I'll include it in either the next one, or if need be, I'll even do a third one. So again, thank you for the questions. Keep an eye out for part two, and I will see you on the next one.